I guess first quick statement, obviously hard-fought game by both teams. A lot of plays being made by individuals and both teams in terms of, hustle plays, 50-50 balls, getting on the floor, all the way from the beginning to the end. So hard-fought game, which you would expect to see in playoff basketball.
Owen Pence, Boston Globe. Coach, Eric seemed to struggle tonight. What do you need to see from him in the rest of the series that you didn't see tonight?
Well, I think the foul trouble kind of, kept it, it was bursts of minutes instead of longer stretches. He picked up the two, second, which was fine. He's still going to keep playing. But then he came in terms of when he had his fourth, picked up the fifth one pretty quickly. And so just, being consistently out there on the floor. But for him, what we need is to be aggressive. And when we say that, it doesn't mean, you're shooting all the time. I thought, even like the baseline jumper pull-up was a good shot, was in the corner for the three. Pump fake, one dribble pull-up, that's a good look. But again, it's more the aggressiveness to get in the paint and make plays not only for himself but for others as well. Want to see that defensively. He's kind of the head of our snake in terms of the pressure that he can put on opponents, so we're going to need to see some of that too.
Joe, Mark Altman, Associated Press. Game of just a lot of momentum swings and runs, especially your big second quarter, but even typified at the end of the game with Rozier and Middleton swapping threes. So just talk about the ups and downs in that game.
Right. Well, it's, obviously we talk about this a lot, 48-minute game, in tonight's case, 53. But both teams are going to keep fighting. Both teams are going to scrap. I thought there was a lot of loose balls or 50-50s or deflections that they might have come up with that, if we get, maybe it's a different possession. There was one, Chris had a great deflection, but we couldn't pick up where the ball had gone, didn't secure that one, and in a couple instances, like they end up shooting, 11 for 26 from three. Some of those are, like Rozier hit a couple of big threes, obviously, as you mentioned, and some of them are off of plays where, hey, if we could secure the ball, then it's a different story.
Joe, Nick Friedel, ESPN. What was your view on that sixth foul they called on Giannis?
My view is he blew his whistle and called the sixth foul on Giannis, and at 6 fouls, you're out of the game. That he fouled him, and that was his 6th foul.
Joe, Kane Pittman, pick and roll. Offensive rebounds was 11-5 on the night. You spoke about the deflections, and they were coming up with some loose balls, but the actual those rebounds, they seem to get some big ones in the fourth and OT. Do you put that down to, as you said, the lucky bounce or its positioning there?
It's a little bit of both in certain cases, but at the end of the day, those are also 50-50s in certain ways in terms of being able to hit guys and go chase them down. You have to get the dirty rebounds. One in particular that stood out that we didn't get, there were a couple of guys battling in the paint and a couple of guys on the perimeter, and they just hustled for it. But we had hustle plays too. I don't want to take any of that out of context. We played well and we played hard, and that's what this series is going to be. Both teams fighting, and each little play will matter. So the offensive rebounds that they're getting, we've got to try and limit those. Deflections, when we get them, got to try and pick up those 50-50 balls. And then conversely, taking care of the ball. The first quarter, 8 turnovers is too many. But for the rest of the game, for the most part, we did a better job of taking care of it.
Joe, Sean Devaney with the Sporting News. The shot that Chris Middleton hit to send it into overtime, how many progressions had Giannis gone through before he threw the pass, and how much of that is something that you've worked on, or just kind of winging at that point?
So we've worked on plays at the end of the game, obviously throughout the season, but in particular here because of things that Boston will do defensively. He had actually gone through 2, I would say, in terms of the progressions of what he looked at. But at the end of the day, we had a couple of things in mind that we needed to take a look at because of what their defenses are. We went with what we thought was the best. Chris ended up popping to an area that, he ended up getting a wide open look. But, great shot by him, good poise by Giannis to be able to inbound the ball. In some ways fortunate, but, at the end of the day, we were able to get a look with a very short amount of time on the clock.
Couple final questions, Steve. Coach Steve Belpat, Boston Herald. You were talking about loose balls, 50-50 plays, whatnot. There was one in the fourth quarter where Horford misses an outside shot, tracks down the offensive rebound. Just him in general, Al seemed to be a bit more assertive today with the ball. What kind of difficulties did that present for you guys?
Just Al in general?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Al Horford's a very good player, and I think one of the things about him through the years that you would talk about is just consistency. He does what he does each night. But that having been said, I think matchup-wise, Giannis battled him really hard. At times, John battled him very hard. Made him have to work. I think both teams ended up having to work. Give their guys credit, like we mentioned earlier. Rozier hit some tough shots, but Al made some big plays for them. Ends up with a double-double, but he's on the perimeter handling the ball some. He's in the post. He's a versatile piece for them. And we had different matchups on him as well throughout the night, and give him credit for the plays that he made. But again, I think a lot of our guys made some plays on both ends of the floor too.
Jared Weiss, The Athletic. For the first couple quarters, it seemed like they were successful in trying to get Giannis to pick up his dribble when he drove, but you guys seemed to figure that out in the second half. What types of adjustments did you make to find those seams?
Well, the biggest thing we've talked about is that, trying to create space on the floor. One of the things that that's why going back to our turnovers, some of them were we were playing in a crowd. Some of it was, we had a couple where we drove along the baseline and, stepped out of bounds. And we'll have to look at all these things in terms, like that's another play where maybe it's not bodies in front of you, but is there enough space to get along the baseline? Are you strong enough to get through, guy might bump you, maybe he does or doesn't, but is there not even enough space there to go and attack? So we'll have to look at that. But again, for him, and for all our team, it's getting our spacing right. I even felt down the stretch, we had a couple of good looks on threes ourselves that didn't go down, and that's part of the spacing. If they collapse, we want to be able to kick it out and be ready to knock those shots down.